In this video, we're going to have a look at how you can use trigonometry to find the missing angles in right angle triangles. So just recalling that a right angle triangle always has this symbol in the corner. So it'll only work with triangles with that symbol in the corner, triangles with a 90-degree angle. So in this video, we're going to be using some opposite operations to be rearranging some algebra. Now we know that the opposite of multiply is divide and the opposite of plus is minus, but we've been working with some trig ratios. So we have sine, cosine, and tangent. So we need to know what are the opposites of these so that we can use those to help us rearrange some formulas. So the opposite of sine is inverse sine. The opposite of cosine is inverse cos. And the opposite of tan is inverse tan. Now these will be buttons on your calculator, so it might be helpful to have a look and try and locate those so you know where to find them. But we'll see some examples in a moment of how you can use these opposite operations to help you find missing angles in a right angle triangle. When trying to find a missing angle in a right angle triangle, it's always handy that we have our trig ratios nearby that we can refer to. So I've got mine here, and my tip is to always have these maybe written on the side of your page or somewhere that you can quickly refer to. So with this example here, we have a right angle triangle, we have two of its sides labelled and one angle. So if you've never seen this symbol before, this symbol is called theta, and we often use this in the place of an unknown angle. So our first little task is to label the sides of the triangle. So the opposite side to the right angle is always going to be the hypotenuse. It's also the longest side length in the triangle. The side length right next to the angle is the adjacent. And then the side length that's opposite the angle, we call that one the opposite. So we're looking for a ratio that involves the hypotenuse and the adjacent. So for this, we are going to be using the cosine function or the cosine ratio, hypotenuse and adjacent. So our first step is to substitute these numbers into this particular ratio. So this is our formula. Now let's substitute those values in. So cosine theta stays as theta because it's an unknown angle. There's nothing that we can put in there. Now on the top of the fraction, the adjacent, that's 1, and the hypotenuse, that's 2. Now, because we're trying to solve for the angle, we want to get the angle on its own. So we're going to do some algebra work here. So to undo this particular function here, cosine of theta, the opposite of this particular operation is inverse cosine, which looks like this, cos with a little -1 up the top. And as always, we need to do the same to both sides. So what we end up with is theta's on its own, but now we have inverse cosine, and that fraction is inside the brackets. So at this point, we would get our calculator out, type in inverse cosine of 1/2, and we'll see what we get. So we get 60. So that means that the missing angle inside this right angle triangle is 60 degrees. Let's have a look at another example. So our first step is to label the sides of this triangle. So the side opposite the right angle is the hypotenuse, and it's also the longest side length. The side next to the angle is the adjacent side, and the side that's directly opposite the unknown angle we label as the opposite side length. So we are looking for a ratio that deals with the adjacent side and the opposite side. So for us, we're going to use the tangent ratio, or tan. So our next step is to substitute these values in. Okay, so tan, theta stays as theta because we don't know the angle size. We're going to find that out. On the top of the fraction, we need to put the opposite side length, so that's 10. And on the bottom of the fraction, we need to put the adjacent side length, so that's 12. We want to get theta on its own. We're trying to solve for theta, so let's do the opposite of the tan function, which is inverse tan. To both sides. So that means that these two cancel out. That means that on this side we have inverse tan of 10 over 12. So at this point we would get our calculator out, type in inverse tan of 10 over 12, and we'll see what we get. We want an answer to 2 decimal places. Now my calculator says 39.8055. So if I'm going to 2 decimal places, I need to look at the number that comes next, which is a 5. And that's 5 or higher. So that means that, get rid of that 5, but this 0 needs to be rounded up. So it would become 39.81. So that missing angle is 39.81 degrees.